So it's time to reading. I brought the book, the title, the SUN, the S means the Solar Utility Network. That is about the spacecraft S.T.R.A.X. S.T.R.A.X, the name stood for the Solar Transit and Research Explorer, the most advanced spacecraft humanity had ever built. And this book for that dedication for this who look toward the stars and imagine what might be waiting beyond them. And is Mars was supposed to be humanity's next great frontier. Six astronauts were chosen for a historic mission to explore and prepare the red planet for future settlement. The spacecraft S.T.R.A.X carried them farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled before, but one of them had a different plan. Kaiser Clark was never meant to be part of the mission. One outlaw, an outlaw with a hidden past, he infiltrates the expedition with a single goal to uncover the secret buried deep beneath Mars. When the mission reaches the planet, Kaiser betrays the crew and begins searching beneath the surface. What he finds is something no one expected. As hidden systems across Mars begin to awaken, Kaiser realizes the planet holds far more than anyone imagined. What started as a mission of exploration becomes a race for control of an entire world. Now, with Earth unaware of what has truly happened on Mars, Kaiser holds the key to a power that could change the future of humanity, and he has no intention of giving it back. Yeah, about the author, the Joshua is a passionate storyteller and emerging author who brings imagination, intensity, and creativity to every page he writes, with a strong interest in science fiction and futuristic worlds. Joshua creates stories that explore advanced technology, global conflict, and the complexity of human choice. He is the author of the Sun series, SUN series, beginning with SUN Project Mars, where he introduced readers to gripping narratives filled with ambition, mystery, and powerful characters like Kaiser. His work often blends action, strategy, and emotional depth, reflecting his unique vision of the future. Joshua continues to develop new stories and expand his universe on me, aiming to inspire readers with bold ideas and unforgettable adventures. He is my daughter's grandson, uh, uh, my grandson of my daughter's. For my daughter has 4 kids. He is the first son. I already read his first the book is the scent of possibility is related to kind of the scent of family is possibility. It's go to the completeness. It include the possibility. So it was really so cool book. But this one also, I want to see the second book of this series, but I expect still the series about for the space, even not only of this earth, but also the over uh, over the space. There are lots of uh, uh, planets and more the nameless, planets are still over there. And I hope that related the Bible, uh, the story, and uh, come, go to this story still with the AI, aid. I read already. Uh, this content has 10. Let me read the table contents 1 through 10. 1, the announcement, the chapter 1 announcement, 2, sabotage, 3, hijacked, 4, the cost of a new name, 5, the selection, 6, beyond the atmosphere, 7, the betrayer, for 8, the plan, 9, the last step, 10, control. It has an epilogue, and then there are, I already read until the chapter 4. So chapter 1 is the so interesting. So I want to read chapter 1 and 2 about the characters, explained here. I will go first chapter 5. Today's chapter 5. Anyway, I want to read until the chapter 10. So let's go, chapter 5. The selection, the training complex at Cape Canaveral was quieter than most people expected. Outside the tall security gates, the launch towers and spacecraft dominated the horizon. The S.T.R.A.X rocket rose above the surrounding structures like a silver monument, its massive body reflecting sunlight across the Florida coast. Inside the astronaut training facility, however, everything felt controlled. The precise rows of glass-walled rooms lined the main corridor. Each room contained candidates studying data, screens, performing physical tests, or undergoing medical evaluation. Every candidate inside the building had already passed the first round of selection. Hundreds of applicants had started the process. Only 8 remained. Yeah, uh, 8 candidates. Just wait. I already read this. Wow, it's long chapter, long. Excuse me. And chapter 6, not yet. I didn't yet. Chapter 6 is long. Only 8 remained. 8 candidates who stood between humanity and the first long-term mission to Mars. Kaiser stood among them. The room where the finalists waited was simple. A long table set in the center, surrounded by chairs. Digital screens displayed mission statistics, spacecraft diagrams, the mission timelines. None of the candidates spoke much. Everyone understood the situation. The International Military Space Command was about to make its decision. A tall officer wearing a dark uniform entered the room. Several other officials followed him, including scientists and mission commanders responsible for the S.T.R.A.X expedition. The officer stopped at the front of the room. "Good morning," he said calmly. "My name is Admiral Victor Kessler, Director of the Astronaut Operations for the Mars mission." The candidates straightened slightly in their seats. "You have all passed the most difficult selection program our command has ever conducted," Kessler continued. "For the past 6 months, each of you has been tested physically, intellectually, and psychologically. Behind him, one of the large screens activated. Uh, Images from the training program appeared. High gravity, centrifuge tests, zero gravity simulations, emergency spacecraft repair exercise, long duration isolation chambers. You have trained under extreme conditions, Kessler said. Some of you are military test pilots, others are engineers, scientists, and mission specialists. He paused, but the S.T.R.A.X mission cannot take all of you. The room became very quiet. Only 5 of you will join the mission crew. He tapped the control panel beside him. Another image appeared on the screen. 3 astronauts wearing mission uniforms. These 3 individuals are master astronauts. They have each completed multiple orbital missions and deep space operations. The names appeared beneath their images. Commander Elena Vargas, Flight Specialist Daniel Joe, and the Systems Commander Marcus Hale. They will lead the mission. The 8 candidates studied the images carefully. These 3 astronauts have already been selected, Kessler said. They will command the spacecraft and guide the mission. He turned back toward the group. That means 5 positions remain. 5 candidates from the room would join the 3 master astronauts. Together they would form the crew that would travel to Mars. The room remained silent. Kaiser watched the screen calmly. During the past month, he had competed against some of the most skilled people he had ever met. Military pilots capable of controlling experimental aircraft at the edge of space. Scientists who had spent decades studying planetary environments, engineers who understood the spacecraft systems better than anyone on Earth. But Kaiser had not entered the program unprepared. Every test the program had given him had been something he could handle. The survivor training, the technical exams, the pressure simulations. Living outside the law had taught him something useful: how to remain calm when everything around him was falling apart. The selection officer looked down at the tablet in his hand. The first candidate selected for the S.T.R.A.X Mars mission. He paused briefly. Dr. Lena Kovacs, one of the candidates, stood slowly as the room applauded politely. The second candidate, Commander Javier Morales, another candidate, rose. The third, Lieutenant Rachel Tanaka. The list continued. Each name represented years of training and sacrifice. Finally, the officer looked up again. The fifth and final candidate selected for the S.T.R.A.X mission. The room felt completely still. Kaiser's new identity name. Kaiser stood calmly. Applause filled the room. No one knew who he really was. To the International Military Space Command, he was simply another highly qualified astronaut candidate. Now he was one of the 5 selected astronauts, together with the 3 master astronauts, they formed the complete crew of the S.T.R.A.X mission. 8 people, 8 humans who would leave Earth and travel toward Mars. Admiral Admiral Kessler stepped forward again. "Congratulations," he said. "You are now the official crew of the S.T.R.A.X Mars expedition." Behind him, the screen changed. The image of the spacecraft appeared again. The massive rocket had waited on the launch pad. "Launch is scheduled in 12 days, Kessler said. "You are training from this point forward. We'll focus on mission coordination, spacecraft operation, and final flight preparation." He looked directly at the new crew. "In less than 2 weeks, you will leave Earth." The meeting ended shortly afterward as the new astronauts walked through the training complex. The technicians and the mission staff congratulated them. Outside, the S.T.R.A.X rocket stood against the blue Florida sky. Kaiser paused near one of the observation windows and looked toward the launch pad. The mission had entered its final stage. The robots on Mars were already waiting. Soon the spacecraft would launch, and when it did, he would finally be on his way to Mars. The training facility changed the moment the 8 astronauts were selected. Before the announcement, the candidates had been competitors. Now they were a crew. The transition was immediate. Security clearance badges were upgraded. Their living quarters were moved to the restricted astronaut wing of the facility. Access to mission control rooms, spacecraft simulations, and classified mission data was granted. Everything was different. Every hallway they walked through now belonged to the mission. The first meeting between the selected astronauts and the 3 master astronauts took place the next morning. Inside the briefing room overlooking the launch complex, the 8 crew members sat around the circular table. Commander Elena Vargas stood near a large screen displaying the S.T.R.A.X spacecraft. She had flown 3 orbital missions and 1 lunar supply operation. Among the astronauts, she was known for being calm under extreme pressure. Her reputation was the reason she had been chosen to command the mission. Standing beside her were the other 2 veteran astronauts, Marcus Hare, systems commander, a former military pilot, was 1,000 of hours flying experimental spacecraft. His responsibility during the mission would be the spacecraft's propulsion structure systems and the navigation's stability. Next to him was Daniel Joe, flight specialist. Joe was a robotics expert. His experience working with remote machines in orbit made him the ideal person to coordinate operations with the Mars robots. The remaining 5 astronauts listened carefully as Vargas began the briefing. For the next 12 days, she said, your lives living belong your lives belong to this mission. Behind her, the screen changed to show the spacecraft interior layout. S.T.R.A.X is designed for long duration in interplanetary travel. Every member must understand every system. Yeah, she looked around the room. If something fails during the mission, we cannot call Earth for help. Her voice remained calm. We fixed the problem ourselves, the astronauts nodded. Everyone in the room understood the reality of the situation. Once the spacecraft left Earth, they would be alone. The newly selected astronauts began introducing themselves. Dr. Lena Kovacs had spent most of her career studying plant, plant, planetary geology. She would analyze the Martian surface and coordinate research operation. Commander Javier Morales was a former military pilot with experience flying experimental spacecraft. Rachel Tanaka specialized in life support engineering. Two other candidates had been selected as well. Isaac Nedloville, robotics system engineer, and Kaiser. To the crew, Kaiser appeared to be an aero, yeah, aero, uh, aerospace engineer with extensive knowledge of spacecraft navigation systems. The identity he had created past every background investigation. No one questioned it. When it was his turn to introduce himself, he kept his explanation simple. Aerospace systems engineering, he said calmly. Orbital navigation research. Marcus Hale nodded. We are going to need someone who understands the navigation computers, Hale said. Glad you are here. Kaiser simply nodded. The next 12 days became the most intense training period any of them had ever experienced. Each day began before sunrise. The astronauts entered the simulation chambers and that recreated the interior of the S.T.R.A.X spacecraft. Inside the simulators, they practiced every possible situation: docking procedures, engine malfunctions, navigation system failures, life support emergencies, meteor, meteor, meteor impacts, communications loss with Earth. The training systems threw problem after problem at the crew. Sometimes alarm screamed while lights flickered. Sometimes the oxygen systems failed. Sometimes the spacecraft, sometimes spacecraft drifted off course. Every time the crew had to react quickly. Commander Vargas watched carefully. She wanted to know how the new astronauts behaved under pressure. Most of them performed well, some performed exceptionally. One astronaut in particular stood out. Kaiser During the simulations, he remained unusually calm. When systems failed, he analyzed the problem quickly and proposed solutions. When navigation calculations changed unexpectedly, he adjusted him them adjusted them faster than the computer systems themselves. Marcus Hare noticed it first. After one simulation, Hare leaned toward Vargas. That engineer, he said quietly, the new one. Vargas glanced across the room where Kaiser was reviewing system logs. What about him? Hare shrugged slightly. He learns fast. Vargas watched for a moment. He'd have to, she said. Everyone in this room does. Outside the training facility, the S.T.R.A.X rocket continued preparing for launch. The spacecraft toured above the launch pad. The fuel systems were installed. The cargo modules were loaded. Communication arrays were tested. Every component had to function perfectly. Millions of kilometers of space separated Earth from Mars. A mistake during launch could end the mission before it even began. While the rest of the crew trained, Kaiser continued studying the spacecraft. At night, he reviewed the navigation system code, the propulsion algorithms, the communication relays connecting the ship to Earth. Every system had weakness. He wasn't planning uh, to sabotage the ship, not yet, but understanding the systems gave him control. The robots on Mars would soon begin their hidden work, digging deeper beneath the planet's surface toward the Martian core, toward the secret that Acuron and the 76 masters of the apostles believed was buried there. Kaiser studied the spacecraft diagrams late into the night. Soon the training would end. Soon the launch countdown would begin. And once the rocket left Earth, there would be no turning back. Launch day arrived quietly. No one in the crew said much that morning. The astronaut quarters were unusually still, as if even the building understood that something had changed. The weeks of competition were over. The long days of selection, testing, interviews, evaluations, and simulations had ended. There were no more ranking boards, no more fitness trials, no more psychological sessions with silent officials taking notes behind the glass. No, there was only the mission. A digital clock in the crew wing displayed the time in bright white numbers. T 06 42 19, 6 hours 42 minutes until lunch. Kaiser woke before the alarm sounded. For a few moments he lay still in the dim room, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air system in the war. Everything around him felt controlled, measured, engineered. Even the silence of the quarters had been designed. He sat up and swung his feet to the floor. Mars. Let's go, Mars. The Mars, the world had changed shape inside his mind over the past year. Once it had been distant, abstract, almost mythical. mythical, a red dot in the sky, a rumor, a theory wrapped in the old writings of Akulon and the warnings of the 76 masters of the apostles. Now it was real, closer than it had ever been. Not physically, not yet. The planet still radiated millions of kilometers away beyond the blackness of deep space. But the path to it had become real. The ship was ready. The crew had been chosen. His false identity had survived every screening. Every interview, every military review, the money had held, the records had held, the training had held. And now he had reached the final threshold. The room lights brightened, automatically shifting from low amber to cool white. A calm recorded voice sounded over the intercom. Crew wake up begins now. Medical check and suite prep in 60 minutes. Kaiser stood and crossed to the narrow window set into the wall. In the distance, beyond security lights and low support buildings, the launch tower stood against the pale dark of early morning, and there it was, S.T.R.A.X. The rocket rose into the fading night and like a silver blade, impossibly tall, surrounded by scaffolding, floodlights, vapor, and the stair. Even from far away, it looked alive, as if it had been waiting for this morning longer than any of them had. He watched it for several seconds, then he turned away and began getting dressed. The crew breakfast took place in a private room near the medical wing. No cameras, no press, no speeches, just the 8 astronauts and a few mission staff members moving quietly through practiced routines. The food was simple, calculated, and unremarkable. Protein, hydration, control carbohydrates, monitored caffeine. Everyone ate because they were supposed to, not because they were hungry. Commander Elena Vargas sat at the head of the table, posture straight, expression calm. She looked as if she had already entered the mission hours ago. Beside her, Marcus Hare reviewed a tablet while eating in short, efficient bites. Daniel Cho stared into a cup of coffee, silent, his attention somewhere inside his own mind. The 5 newly selected astronauts were quieter than usual. Lena Kovacs picked at her food while glancing occasionally toward the window. Javier Morales looked almost perfectly relaxed, but Kaiser could see the tension in the way his fingers tapped lightly against the side of his tray. Rachel Tanaka ate carefully, methodically, as if following a checklist. Isaac Nodelov, uh, Isaac Nodelov leaned back in his chair and exhaled once through his nose, then looked around the table. So Isaac said at last, his voice low, "This is it?" Marcus glanced up from the tablet. "That's usually how lunch day works." A few people smiled faintly, The moment passed, but the tension remained. Vargas set down her cup. Listen carefully, she said. The room quieted immediately. Everything from this point forward is procedure. You know your assignments, you know the launch sequence, you know emergency contingencies for orbiter ascent, orbiter insertion, and transfer staging. She looked from face to face, no improving, no heroics, no second guessing the timeline once we are in motion. Her eyes settled briefly on each of them, one by one. If something goes wrong, you follow protocol until I tell you otherwise. No one argued. No one would have. She had flown too many missions and survived too much for anyone in that room to doubt her authority. Daniel Joe finally spoke. Mission Control already ran the final robotics update request this morning. He said no recovery yet from the DSSP robot failure. Lena looked up. Still nothing? Joe shook his head. They are still trying to isolate command corruption from the failed deployment logs. A brief silence followed. Everyone in the room knew about the DSSP incident. Officially, details had been restricted. The crew had only been told what they needed to know. The latest robotic support package had failed. The cause remained under investigation, and no confirmed connection to the Mars flight systems had been found. But astronauts were good at reading what was not said. They knew something serious had happened. Kaiser kept his expression neutral. Isaac leaned forward. Do they think it was sabotage? Marcus answered before Joe could. They think a lot of things, and none of those things change our lunch. That ended the conversation. Kaiser lowered his gaze to the tray in front of him and took another measured bite. Outwardly calm, internally precise. The failed robot launch had created damage, confusion, delays, but not enough to stop the mission. It had not needed to. The robots had already been touched. That was enough. Now there was the ship, not to hijack. Not yet, not recklessly, not by force, to understand, to enter, to ride all the way to Mars while everyone around him believed he belonged there. He looked once more toward the window. The rocket remained still. The medical phase moved quickly. Blood pressure, oxygen saturation, neurological checks, joint mobility, suit fitting verification. Every astronaut passed it through a line, physicians, technicians, and is it right? The room quieted immediately. Everything from this point, right? No one argued, no one would have been looked up, was still nothing. First astronauts were good, were reading what was not said, right? Blood pressure, yeah. Every astronaut passed through a line of physicians, technicians, and fight readiness specialists. The system was strict but smooth, practiced down to the second. When it was Kaiser's turn, a physician scanned his chart. No sleep issues? No. Hydration stable? No. Yes. Any nausea this morning? No. The physician nodded and signed off on the digital slate. Cleared. A suit technician guided him into the prep chamber where the lounge and ascent suits had already mm, been arranged. The room was bright, stir and crowded with a support step moving around in controlled patterns. His suit hung upright in a support frame, white and dark gray, reinforced at the joints, layered with the communication wiring, pressure systems, environmental regulation, and emergency seals. The mission patch was fixed onto the upper sleeve. The S.T.R.A.X insignia rested across the chest. For a moment he just looked at it. This was the part that would have seemed impossible once, not the hacking, not the forged records, not the military selection process. Those were systems, and systems could be studied, learned, manipulated. But this, standing in a room built for astronauts, watching technicians prepare his launch chute while the real Mars mission counted down around him, this was something else. A sweet technician stepped beside him. Arms up. Kaiser obeyed. The process took time. On the layers first, sensor mesh, cooling garment, pressure lining, outer shell, seal rings, communication collar, gloves detached. For now, helmet carried separately until final boarding. The technicians worked efficiently, checking pressure, seams, biometric links, a microphone response, and the suit mobility. How does the shoulder feel? One asked. Fine. Any restriction at the knee? The technician adjusted a feeding ring. We checked the readout and nodded. Good. Across the room, the rest of the crew was suiting up as well. Marcus' hair looked completely at ease, as though he had done this so many times that the body remembered the routine before the mind did. Daniel Joe was deep in conversation with the systems technician about relay redundancy. Rachel Tanaka flexed her gloved hands while another tech checked her wrist seals. Javier grinned at nobody in particular and said something that made one of the support staff laugh nervously. Elena Vargas stood motionless while two technicians ran her final pressure scan. She looked less like a passenger preparing for launch and more like a commander stepping into command. An official enters the chamber. Crew transit begins in 40 minutes. The room shifted immediately. Final checks accelerated. The energy changed. Casual, casual words disappeared. Everything narrowed toward the next step. Helmet check, com check, heart rate monitor sync, emergency tether pack, oxygen backup. The technician stepped in front of Kaiser with the helmet in both hands. Ready? He gave a single nod. The helmet was lowered into place and locked with a mechanical click. The outside world softened instantly. Sounds became more intimate, filtered through the comes and internal acoustic system. His own breathing became louder. A voice sounded in his ear. Come check. Reading you, Kaiser said. Clear. The technician raised a thumb and stepped back. For the first time that morning, Kaiser felt the full reality of where he was. He was inside the suit, not near the mission, not around it, inside it. The transport convoy rolled out beneath a brightening Florida sky. The astronauts rode in two armored crew vehicles escorted by security units, and the support cars rose around the launch complex had been sealed hours earlier. Every fence line, building roof, and access gate was guarded. Kaiser sat by the window inside the vehicle, helmet connected to the internal support line, gloved hands resting against his knees. No one spoke much during the drive. There was no need. Outside, the landscape moved slowly past low concrete structures, service roads, fuel towers, communication arrays, distant cranes, and finally the growing presence of the launch pad. The closer they came, the larger S.T.R.A.X became. From a distance, the rocket had seemed monumental. Up close, it was overwhelming. The support tower rose beside it like a second structure trying to hold back something far beyond human scale, while a white vapor spilled intermittently from vent lines. Sunlight reflected in building blinding flashes from sections of metal, skin, and scaffold. Even through the reinforced glass of the vehicle, the rocket seemed less like a machine and more like a vertical force, a column of intention assembled from still pure mathematics and risk. Isaac said softly over the crew channel, "Every time I see it, it looks bigger." "Because we are getting closer," Marcus replied. A few seconds later, vehicle stopped. Ground crew surrounded them immediately. Doors opened, warm air flooded in. The astronauts stepped out one by one onto the pad access zone, moving slowly in their suites under the guidance of technicians and escort personnel. The launch tower loomed above them. Kaiser lifted his head and followed the full height of the vehicle upward until the upper stage disappeared into brightness. He had spent months studying schematics, systems, internal modules, propulsion architecture, missions, sequencing. He knew the ship intellectually, but knowing it on paper and standing beneath it were different things. The rocket was real in a way that nothing else had been real, and now he was about to enter it. Cameras were present at the distance kept behind the secured barriers. Official mission footage would later show the walking toward the access elevator in their shoes. 8 white figures moving across steel beneath the rocket that would carry them beyond the Earth. But those cameras were far enough away that he did not have to think about them. Good, he prepared it that way. The elevator climb up the tower was slow. No one spoke much inside. The walls vibrated faintly with the pulse of nearby machinery. A technician at the control panel monitored the ascent while another reviewed boarding sequence timing. When the doors finally opened, the access arm stretched ahead of them toward the spacecraft entry hatch. Beyond it, open air, far below, the ground looked unreal, flat, distant, and already beginning to feel separate. One by one, the astronauts crossed the access arm. ground crew met them at the hatch. Marcus Hale entered first, followed by Daniel Joe and Lena Kovacs, Rachel Javier, Isa Kaiser, and finally Elena Vargas. After a final exchange with launch support, the interior of the ascent module was tighter than the full-scale simulators had ever made it feel. Everything inside had been reduced to function: displays, harness points, control surface, handle holes, emergency equipment, no wasted volume anywhere. Crew loading technicians moved quickly, guiding each astronaut into assigned seating positions for launch. Kaiser was strapped into his couch with practiced efficiency: shoulder harness, waist lock, leg brace points, sweet line connections, comlink confirmation. A technician leaned into view, seat connections secure, and pressure line stable. You good? I'm good. The technician nodded and moved on. The hatch remained open while final boarding checks continued. From his position, Kaiser could see only parts of the cabin and brief movements of the other crew members. Voices flowed across the comm system in layers: crew channel, launch support, suite technicians, flight director confirmations. Then he heard Elena Vargas. Crew statues. One by one they responded. Hey, ready. Joe ready. Kovacs ready. Morales ready. Tanaka ready. Nodilov, Nodilov ready. Kaiser gave his response under the false name that now belonged to every official system on Earth. Ready. Finally, Vargas answered for herself. Commander ready. A few minutes later, the hatch was sealed. The sound was unmistakable. A deep mechanical locking sequence followed by sudden finality. No one said anything for a moment. They all felt it. The ship was closed. Earth was now outside. The countdown passed T minus 90 minutes. Mission control voices moved steadily through launch procedures: fueling status, pressure stabilization, guidance element, um, element, communications check, weather confirmation, GO no go polling. Kaiser listened carefully, not because he needed to. He had trained on every stage of the sequence, but because this was the point where every mission became fragile. Massive systems were moving into motion all around them. Hundreds of people below were making decisions that would either send them into space or stop the launch in its final hour. And yet inside the cabin there was almost nothing to do except wait. The waiting was its own form of pressure. Javier broke the silence first, so this is the glamorous part of the job. No one laughed, but Rachel answered, "At least you are still making jokes, trying to maintain morale by talking too much," Marcus said. "That's one of my strengths." This time a few faint smiles moved across the crew channel. Elena let it continue for a second, then said, "Enjoy your final unnecessary commands while gravity still belongs to you." Javier answered, "Yes, Commander." Kaiser remained silent. He was watching the internal clock and feeling the ship around him. Subtle subtle vibrations, system transitions, the distant language of pumps and pressure changes traveling through structure. Somewhere beyond the cabin walls, beneath them and around them, enough energy to tear a city apart was being organized into ascent. Ascent. He closed his eyes briefly. Mars, the robust Akulon, the hidden thing in the core. Every step had led here, not to the launch itself, but through it. This was the doorway. The ship was only a vessel, but it was the only one that mattered now. Once they reached the transfer orbit and began the long passage outward, the mission would start changing in ways none of the others understood. Not immediately, carefully, at the right moment, he opened his eyes again. Mission control continued the pour. Flight, go. Guidance, go. Prop, go. Life support, go. Telemetry, go. Range, go. The sequence continued. At last, a voice from flight director came through with calm finality. S.T.R.A.X, you are go for launch. No one in the cabin answered right away. Then Elena Vargas said, "Copy, go for launch." The final 10 minutes were different. Everything sharpened. No more loose conversation, no more side comments. Every sound seemed louder now, every vibration more meaningful. The rocket felt less like an object and more like a restrained event. Mission control counted down in precise intervals. T minus 10 minutes. The cabin lighting adjusted. T minus 5 minutes. Kaiser tightened his grip unconsciously against the arm restraint. Vehicle internal power. A slight shift passed through the systems. Guidance internal. Pressurization nominal. T minus 1 minute. The voice now came faster. He could hear his own breathing inside the helmet, could feel the sweat against his body, could feel the seat beneath him and the enormous vertical line of the rocket extending far below. 30 seconds, the structure trembled faintly. 15, a deep sound began somewhere beneath them, not yet full engine ignition, but the first awakening of machinery too large to understand by sound alone. 10, Kaiser stared straight away. The 9, Mars. 8, the core. 7, the secret. 6, the ship. 5, the crew. 4, the lie. 3, the plan. 2, the future. 1, the engines ignited. The sound was beyond sound. It arrived through structure. First, a violent physical force rising through the entire vehicle, shaking every surface, every harness point, every bone in his body. The cabin became thunder and vibration and controlled violence. For one impossible moment, it felt as though the ship might tear itself apart beneath them. Then came movement, slow at first, almost too slow to trust. Then undeniable. S.T.R.A.X lifted. The launch tower dropped away outside. The full force of ascent drove them back into their seats as the rocket rose into the morning sky. No one spoke, no one could. Florida vanished beneath a cloud and fire. The coast became shaped and then colored and distance. The rocket climbed harder. The pressure increased. The vibration changed as they cut through layers of atmosphere. Kaiser felt the earth beginning to lose its hold. Everything he had done, every theft, every forged record, every hacked system, every calculated risk had brought him to this single irreversible motion, upward, away toward Mars, and inside the blazing force of ascent, strapped into a real spacecraft with 7 others who believed they knew who he was. Kaiser felt something he had not allowed himself to feel until that exact moment. Victory! Yeah, victory. And this is the finish uh, chapter. Yeah, let's go to another from 6. May God bless you. Yeah, let's go together.